Okay, so now I've got my animation working for my MoGraph text. Now I'm going to add lights, an environment and camera to this to set it up for rendering. So I'm going to create a really simple lighting system. It's called a physical sky. So I can go to my create menu and go to lights and create a physical sky. So this creates sort of a simulation of a real sort of world sky. There's a gradient of sky gradient. We've got this blue and it goes down to grey at the horizon. There is actually a sun in our physical sky in this brighter area, and it creates a really sort of natural sort of outdoor lighting type look. And if you're new to Cinema 4D, I would recommend using this just to start off getting you some decent lighting in your scene. Now, when we work in this view, this perspective view here, this is sort of a low resolution version of what we actually get for our final render. If I want to see the final render in this view, if I hit Shift R on my keyboard, my computer will just render my current view, and it's properly anti-aliased, and I can see now I've got some nice shading going on here. There is some shadowing happening from my physical sky. I don't have a shadow on the ground because I don't have any kind of ground at the moment. And what I want to do with my 3D text is composite it into this image here. And I want it sitting on the road with a bit of a shadow so it looks like it's actually in place there. Now the other thing I need to do is just have a quick look at this image and first of all check the lighting color in this image. And this is a nice blue sky day, so we want to make sure that our lighting in 3D matches this sort of color tone. Also, we want to see the direction of the shadows in this image to make sure our shadows match up. Now looking at this, the mountain in the background is fully illuminated. The foreground is illuminated. We can't really see too many shadows. Looking at some of these plants in the foreground, I think the sun is slightly on the right-hand side because they're slightly darker on the left. So my guess is whoever took this photo was standing on the edge of the road looking across it. The sun was behind them and probably slightly to their right-hand side. So I'm going to try and recreate that. And I'm just doing this roughly by eye. I'm not trying to be too precise about this. So let's see how to do that. So now that we've got our physical sky here and it's creating some shadowing in our text, we need some sort of a floor to be able to catch the shadows. So if I go to my create menu, I can go to environment and make a floor. Now if I zoom out here, my floor is a rectangle. We can see it here, or square, sorry, in my scene. A floor actually exists infinitely. It goes in all directions, X and Z directions, infinitely all the way through my scene. So it's quite a useful way of just making a floor throughout your entire scene. And now if I position my text here and hit Shift R again, now I can see on the floor those shadows are landing there in my view. So now I can definitely see these shadows. We're going to need to cut these out somehow to composite into our image. We'll come to that in a second. Okay, so I can see my shadows, but it would be nice to be able to see them here in my viewport while I work so that I don't have to keep doing test renders. So if I go to my options panel for this perspective view, a little way down there's a shadows setting. I can turn that on, and now what I get is a rough version of my shadows in the viewport here, and I can see which direction they're going. Now that I can see those, I can get my physical sky, grab the rotate tool, and you can see the physical sky has a little compass icon here, and it's got north, south, west, east. The physical sky has a time of day, and it has a location, a geographical location. You can pick where you are in the world, and it will actually create a sky system that will create accurate shadows and sun directions based on the time, date, and position in the world that you select here, this is really useful for doing architectural renderings or renderings where you need a fairly accurate idea of where a sun might be. But the good thing about this whole system is I can select it and just rotate the entire sky system around, and as we do that we're effectively rotating the sun around as well. And you can see the shadows changing direction there, and what I want them to do is to be leaning slightly to my left because I thought that sun was slightly to the right. So here they are here, leaning off to the left a little bit. Just going to take them a little bit further, and I'll hit Shift R there, just do another test render to see it. And I might actually rotate it a little bit further around. And let's see what that looks like. That looks better. I'm happy with that. So they're not on too much of a crazy angle, but they're just slightly leaning off to that side. So my shadows are good. I'm happy with that. Okay, so that's the lighting done. So the next thing we want to do is look at some shading for our text, and also we've got a special shader that we're going to put on the ground plane here because we don't want to see this floor when we render. If I hit Shift R again, just to do a quick test. So this is actually the floor we can see, and there it is cutting off at the horizon there. We don't want to see this floor, we only want to see the shadows. Now luckily Cinema 4D has a really clever shader that will actually hide objects but store their shadow information. So if we go to our Materials Manager, which is this little circle with a line under it over the top right hand corner, let's open up our Material Manager. We don't have any materials in our scene yet, but under my Create menu, I'm going to go to Materials and I'm going to create a new Shadow Catcher material. So this is a special kind of material. It doesn't have too many options. You can see its little preview is just a black sphere, and I'm going to drag and drop this onto the floor. Now the floor goes black, and what will be interesting is if I hit Shift R here, the floor is black, we can see it here, we can see there's the horizon line, but what happens when we render this and composite in After Effects, provided that we have this alpha channel turned on, the black floor area will actually be erased and all that will be left is the shadow. So it's really important that this alpha channel is turned on to use this shadow catching material properly. So there's our shadow catching material done. So the next thing I want to do is create some color for my text. So for this, I'm just going to hit on the plus button, which will make a new default material. So this is just a standard material, and if I double click it, I can open it up in the editor. And all I want to do for this one is change the color of it. I'm going to make this red. That's a good color when you're talking about cars and speed and motion. Red is often associated with things moving fast. So if I go to the color tab, I can use my hue, saturation and value buttons here, or sliders, to pick a red color, orangey red. If you don't really like using HSV, you can hit this R icon to change it to RGB blend modes, or you can even hit this wheel button and get a color wheel if you want a color wheel. All these different icons up here are different ways of selecting colors. So even though it looks complicated, it's just giving you different options for selecting your colors. I'm just going to use an RGB system and grab a red, and let's make it an orangey kind of red. Let's make that a little bit darker. There we go. And what I'm going to do, where it says matte for material, I'm just going to rename that red. Often you end up with many materials in your scene. It's a good idea to name them as you go along. Now I want to apply this red material to my text, so I can either drag it onto my text here or into the scene. Either one will work. And there we have it. There's our text with our red material on it. So that's all I need to do there. I can close my material editor, and I'm not going to do any more material work here. I'm just going to keep this really simple, so I can close that manager as well. And if I do a quick test render, Shift R, there's my text. I know I'm getting shadows in there, and that's pretty much ready to go. So all I need to do now is set up a camera, and I will be ready to render my sequence out. So looking at my picture again that I'm going to composite into, I'm looking pretty much directly across the road. The road's going from left to right. There's not really any perspective on the road, so to get my text to sit and match with this road, I want to be looking pretty much front on at my text. So what I'm going to do is just tumble my view around, get my text centered in my view here, get it pretty much straight, and I'm going to go slightly above it because I want to, if I have a look at my picture again, the text is going to sit low in the frame. That means my eye level will be slightly above it. So what I want to do here is make sure my eye level is slightly above this text. And it's centered. The other thing I want to do is just hit play and play through the animation and make sure as it animates and spins, nothing is cutting off or clipping off the edges of my shot there. So that looks pretty good. So I'm happy with this. What I want to do now is create a camera here to make sure that I'm filming, when it comes to render, I'm filming sort of through this view. So let's just pause that and rewind. I'm going to go to my Create menu again, create a camera, and click on just Create Camera. So in Cinema 4D, when we create a camera, it's created where we currently are looking in our 3D scene. And if I hit Option, my left mouse button, and tumble away, so there's the camera there that I created from the position I was looking at that text. And as you can see, it's above the text a little, looking slightly down on it. And so that should match up, hopefully, with my background in After Effects when I composite it. Now, if I want to look through that camera, here's my camera in the object list here. There's a little bracket icon to the right of it. If I click on that, that puts me inside the camera. Now, if I use my Option and my mouse button keys to navigate or to tumble around, I'm actually going to move that camera. I don't want to move the camera, so I'm going to jump back out of it. And there it is, sitting in the right place. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this camera. I'm going to call it Fast Camera, just so I know what it is. It's got its own unique name. And quite often, again, in cinema, you may have many cameras in a shot, in a scene. So it's a really good idea to name your cameras. Okay, so this is actually all set up and ready to go now. I've got my animation done. I've got my shadow catching material on the floor. I've got a red material on my text, and my camera is set up. My physical sky is lighting it. So I'm ready to render. So I'm going to jump into my render settings. So hit Command B. And now let's just double check these. I've got physical renderer set up, which is what I wanted. If I go to that physical tab, I've got adaptive automatic. I'm going to set this to 10% because I'm going to do a production render and I want that to be a slightly better quality. My output, actually I need to just check this, 1920 by 1080, 25 frames a second, and I'm going to render all the frames for this one. Under my save menu, I'm going to choose where I want to save my file, and I've got a folder set up already on my desktop, and I'm going to call this fast. I'm rendering PNG files, and again the alpha channel is turned on, very important. Okay, so that's all ready to go. I can close that window, save my scene, and now I can go to my render menu and add this scene to the render queue. So here's my render queue. Here's a previous render that I've done. I'm just going to delete that one. So for this one, here's the scene. It's called Fast C4D. If I have a look down here, I'm rendering from 0 to 75. That's a total of 76 frames. One thing I want to do as well is just check my camera that I'm rendering. If I click on this, I want to make sure I'm rendering this fast camera. If I leave it on default, that's going to be my perspective viewport. I don't want to render that. I want to render the camera that I've actually created. So that's all ready to go. I can just hit the render button now, and that's going to start rendering. So this will give me an elapsed render time here. It's going to give me an estimate of how long this is going to take. And as it starts to render the frames, you'll see a little preview here of your frames as they start to appear. So I'm going to let this render, and then the next step is to composite it in After Effects.